So just the other day, Nintendo surprised us with a Nintendo Switch 1 focused Nintendo Direct. And now this did kind of leak a couple days ahead of time, but still yet, it was pretty cool to get, two Directs back to back. The second one hasn't happened yet at the time of this recording. That one is going to be on April 2nd and is going to be focused, I'm assuming, exclusively on Nintendo Switch 2 games. And I think we'll talk about that in a separate video. I think I'm going to divide this into two videos. This one's going to be kind of shorter, just specifically focusing on the Direct that already happened. I'm going to give my thoughts on it because I really did want to get my opinion out there because I did a reaction to the Nintendo Direct, but unfortunately there was just like all kinds of technical issues that I realized after I uploaded the video, and it was just kind of not salvageable. So I ended up deleting that video because I was like, this just it doesn't meet a bar of quality that I want to establish for this channel. There was like all kinds of like audio issues where there was like duplicate audio going on, and then there was also like an issue where I clicked on the wrong screen in OBS, so most of the time you were looking at a black screen, so it wasn't good. So I ended up scrapping that video, unfortunately. But I did still want to get my thoughts on the Nintendo Direct out there. And initially, they were pretty negative. I've kind of come around a little bit more now. I do still stand by my belief that I voiced in that video that's now deleted that I thought overall it was probably the worst General Direct we've had in the Nintendo Switch era, in my opinion. I think this was basically, if this didn't have Metroid Prime 4 showing us our first like full gameplay deep dive, then I would really question like why this wasn't just a Nintendo Direct mini, because I think Metroid is really the only thing there keeping this from being a mini. Because we look back, I remember like in it might have been February of 2018, we had a Nintendo Direct mini where they announced a new first party game, but kind of a smaller one. It's a Mario spinoff. It was like Mario Tennis Aces. And then also like a lot of ports, like Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, and I think like Captain Toad was announced during that presentation, and some other stuff. But yeah, I feel like that Direct was probably, it had more worthwhile games than this one, and again, that was a Nintendo Direct mini. So I feel like Nintendo probably should have set everybody's expectations by calling this a mini as opposed to a more general Nintendo Direct. So yeah, like, because I watched Arlo. I love Arlo. He's one of my favorite Nintendo YouTubers. I really respect his commentary and his opinions. And he kind of made the point, but I do disagree with him on this to an extent. That I don't understand why people are upset over the Direct, because this is just that Direct was an appetizer. We still have another Direct coming to look forward to. So it's kind of like complaining that the appetizer didn't fill you up before the full course meal is kind of his analogy. And I get where he's coming from to an extent, but here's the thing. We have what's looking to be, and maybe some way the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct can rectify this, but it's looking like we're going to have at least somewhat of a first-party software drought that we've not had from Nintendo in a very long time. We've really not had that pretty much this whole generation. So, Nintendo has been very consistently putting out roughly one first-party game a month on the Nintendo Switch. It's been that way since like 2017. Maybe a little bit slower during 2018 because I guess they really wanted to front load that first year with all kinds of Switch games. So the second year was a little bit, I feel like there was some first party droughts there, and then of course in 2020 during the pandemic. But other than those two anomalies, Nintendo has been really consistent with that. So I found this Nintendo Direct kind of disappointing because I thought it was really going to fill in the gaps, because since Xenoblade Chronicles X released earlier this month, we really don't know what else is coming in the pipeline. We know that Pokemon Legends ZA is coming to the current gen Switch eventually. We know Metroid Prime 4 is coming to the current gen Switch eventually, but we didn't get any release dates for those. We got a couple new game announcements in this Nintendo Direct, for Rhythm Heaven and a new Tomodachi Life game. But those aren't coming until 2026. So, I really expected, some stuff that we could play, now or like in the immediate future to hold us over until the Switch 2 releases, because we still don't know when the Switch 2 is going to come out. Now maybe this won't be like that huge of a problem if the Switch 2 is going to come out, say, like, I think some rumors have said like, June, and some maybe have said as early as May. And at first I thought like, well, that seems kind of hard to fathom that they would have the Switch ready to go and ship out that soon after the Nintendo Direct. That would just be like, what, a month and a half or something. But I guess realistically they could, because when I think back about it, I guess that was about the time frame between the the Switch 1 January presentation and its release. When was that presentation? Was it like January 20th? Let me look that up. And then I know the Switch came out on like March 3rd. Let me look that up. Nintendo January Switch presentation. We had 2017. Let's see. That was January 13th. Okay. Yeah, so they would have had it would have been about like a month and like 20-ish days or something like that from that Nintendo Direct. Well, it wasn't really a Nintendo Direct, whatever. From that presentation to the release of the new system, if I'm doing my math right, which I might not be. So yeah, that's a pretty short turnaround. Either way you look at it, like, I don't know, 5-6 weeks. Somebody else can do the math. Very professional video here. But so yeah, maybe the Switch could come out in May. But even then, even if it does come out that early, not everybody is going to be able to get their hands on it day one. So what are those Switch 1 owners going to be able to play? And that's where, like, maybe Metroid Prime 4 is going to be cross-gen. People have speculated about that. So maybe it'll release on the Switch and the Switch 2 day and date. So if you can't get your hands on a Switch 2, then you can still play the Switch 1 version on your current Switch. So that'll be a game you'll have to play in May. But presumably it's not looking like we're going to get an April game. So that's a little unfortunate. I guess they could just put out like a tweet or something, or announce something in their new Nintendo Today app, which I guess we'll talk about later. Kind of like how, Xenoblade Chronicles X was revealed, just kind of out of left field one day, just a Twitter drop announcement. But yeah, like I would have probably, if I were a betting man, probably put money on this Nintendo Direct giving us, Metroid Prime 2 and 3 remastered, at least like maybe just like a simple upscaled port, not necessarily a ground up remake like the first Metroid Prime game got. Slap that on the eShop, do a stealth drop, and it's available, after this presentation. Have them like, $30 each or something, I don't know. And then maybe have like a physical bundle come later. But that didn't happen. So we still don't know if we're going to get Metroid Prime 2 and 3 before 4 comes out, because there's probably a decent number of people in the same boat as me. I've never played Metroid Prime 2 and 3, so I would really like to have that knowledge, that experience going into the new game, but it's looking like maybe I won't get that opportunity now unless I want to, dig up the old Wii U and play the Metroid Prime trilogy that was on that. But like, that's kind of cumbersome. I'd much rather have it on my Switch and with a normal control scheme, because I don't want to really point the Wii remote around. But so that's unfortunate. Something else we didn't get, like, this Nintendo Direct felt like the perfect opportunity to give us a whole bunch of the ports, like the Wii U ports, and stuff that we've been waiting ages on. Where was like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess? That could have been, the April game. But we didn't get that because, like, supposedly Nintendo's been holding these games, they've been holding their cards close to their chest, and everybody always says, oh, Wind Waker, and, these games have been done for years, and Nintendo's just sitting on them. Like, supposedly, I'm not a Fire Emblem guy, but from my understanding, supposedly they've been sitting on a remake of Genealogy of the Holy War, which I think was like a Japanese exclusive Fire Emblem game. Why not put that in here? And you could say, like, well, maybe they're saving it all for the Nintendo Direct, the Nintendo Switch 2 Focus Direct. I don't know about that, though. Another one, according to Nate the Hate, Kirby Planet Robobot's supposed to be coming out on the Switch 1 this year? Where was that? So it feels very weird. And then you got other stuff like Yoshi's Woolly World. That would be a very simple, easy port that they could give us to hold us over until the Switch 2 comes out. There's just there's so much that they could have done, and so I feel like as the last Switch 1 focused Nintendo Direct that they really could have went out with a bang, but it feels like they're going out with a whimper. And I don't think that's like, well, I had my expectations too high. I think that, and like kind of Arlo made the point, like, well, we didn't even know we were going to have another Nintendo Direct, so it's, kind of absurd to get upset over this one, when it's just kind of a fun little bonus on top of what we're already getting next week. But, I would have put money on us getting one back in, back in February, and then that never happened, and now we're finally getting one right before the Switch 2 presentation. You can kind of argue whether they should have had it now, whether they should have had it back in February. But either way, I do think that it makes good business sense to have had a Switch 1 Direct before the Switch 2 Direct. Reason being, again, not everybody's going to get one at launch. We don't know what the price point is going to be. It might be, $400. It might be more. People have said, like, with inflation and tariffs and all that crap. I'm no economist, so I don't know. But that maybe it's going to be even more than that. Maybe it's going to cost $500. I can't imagine a universe in which it costs $500 costing as much as the PS5. That would be absurd to me. I feel like that would make the console a much harder sale. But, we'll see what happens, I guess. But, case in point, not everybody's going to be able to afford one. Not everybody's going to be able to get their hands on one because there's going to be some stock issues. I know Nintendo's trying to take a bunch of precautions to circumvent that, but, it is what it is. They're never going to be able to perfectly alleviate all those issues. And then there may be some people that's just, they're content. Like maybe they just got their Switch 1, last Christmas, and they're like, I don't need to upgrade anytime soon. So this Nintendo Direct was important in establishing that they're not going to just abandon the Switch 1 install base of like 150 million users or something crazy like that. Because I think the Switch has sold close to like 150 million units at this point. Getting very dangerously close to becoming the new best-selling game console of all time across handhelds and consoles. It just needs to pass the DS, which is at 155 million, and then the PS2, which I guess is like 160 million now. But it's getting very close, and most of those, according to Nintendo's data, are still active users, which is like crazy. So it's not like people's Switches are just like sitting away gathering dust. Like people are still playing regularly. So it makes logical business sense that Nintendo would want to reassure those customers that like, hey, we're not abandoning you. There's still plenty of games that you can look forward to, to enjoy, even though we've got this new system coming out. And they kind of did that to an extent, again, with like Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life. Granted, those are more... in the case of Rhythm Heaven, that's a much more niche franchise. Tomodachi Life isn't niche per se, but, because it was like, I think, one of the best-selling games on the 3DS. But they are both more casual games, So this Direct really didn't do a whole lot to assure, the hardcore gamer that they'll have a lot to play on the, the Switch in the coming, months and years ahead. But again, though, those couple games that we did get aren't coming out until 2026, so it's just weird. I don't know. Obviously, Nintendo, every console transition tends to be kind of rough, and as far as transitions go, Nintendo is still probably going to have a better one than probably any other system in history. But still, though, it's like, well, if they supposedly, according to all these rumors, have all these games that they just finish and then sit on for a couple of years until the timing is right to release it, why couldn't they have given us at least one of those? I think that would have elevated this Direct so much more if they just given us one first-party Switch game that was like, and it's available right now, or, coming next month, so you've got something to play in April, But they didn't do that, and it just baffles me. Because, again, I don't think it's asking for that much to just, even just like one of those rumored HD ports or remasters, because like that's, you know, if they're wanting to focus most of their first party efforts, their money and their resources and their dev time into new ground up games on the Switch 2, that's fine. I'm not saying they have to make like a whole bunch of completely original Switch 1 games, but just some easy ports, because like those aren't going to be in the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, because people aren't going to get excited like, oh, did you see Yoshi's Woolly World is getting ported as announced in the Switch 2 Direct like that. So now it really felt like it would have been the best time to do that. So I'm just kind of baffled a little bit, I guess. Kirby Planet Robobot, like if it's getting an HD overhaul, I mean, like I don't know that would really be that big of a big enough of a deal to save that for the Switch 2 presentation. That seems like one of those things that would get overshadowed. It's a an enhanced version of a almost 10-year-old at this point 3DS game, and a lot of people say it's one of, if not the best Kirby game. But we've seen now what Kirby can do in 3D, so I feel like if Kirby's going to show up at any capacity in the Switch 2 presentation, it's going to be a new 3D Kirby game, the sequel to Forgotten Land, not a remake of it, because like I feel like it's not going to be that impressive. It's going to be probably more of a remaster than a remake, probably kind of like what we got with Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, or like Pikmin 1 and 2 HD, where it's probably going to be like a very bare bones port, which is fine. It's whatever. But, again, it's not the thing that's going to like, blow people's minds in the Switch 2 presentation. So when are they going to announce it? And I guess maybe, E3 is obviously dead. Maybe, and, that would be pretty crazy if we get like 3 Nintendo Directs within the span of just a couple of months. We got this one in just a few days to look forward to at the start of April, but Nintendo does tend to like doing a June Nintendo Direct. Even since E3 has kind of gone kaput, so they might have missed it like 1 year, but they've still generally tried to have one in June, just kind of smack dab in the middle of the year. So hopefully they continue to do that. So maybe that'll be the time they announce some of those like Switch 1 ports. So that way people who don't have a Switch 2 will still have other games to play throughout the year. But we don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, for me personally, I thought the Nintendo Direct was kind of underwhelming. If I had to give it a score, I initially said like a 6 out of 10, maybe, if that. I think I even said like I would even go 5 out of 10. But the more I sit on it, that's maybe a little bit harsh. Maybe I could give it a 7 out of 10, but that would be, I think, the absolute highest I could go. By the way, apologies if you hear any coughing in the background. I got a sick family member in the other room. But, so yeah, I don't know. But, I've lost my train of thought here. That distracted me. Anyway, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if we get a Nintendo Direct in June. That'll maybe be a mismatch of, Switch 1 titles and then games coming to the Switch 2. And then maybe that's when we'll get some of those ports and stuff announced for the Switch 1. Something else that I would have probably bet money on being here is like a new Mario Baseball. I feel like that's not going to be a super exciting thing to announce during your big grand, Switch 1 reveal presentation, because they're going to want to try to match the same hype that the that January 2017 Switch presentation had, where we got just the most incredible trailer for Breath of the Wild, and they also announced Mario Odyssey and Splatoon 2, and then like an original IP with ARMS and all this other stuff. So I don't think that's the right time to announce a new Mario Baseball. So yeah, I really thought we would have got one here, because we've got like every other Mario Sports franchise on Switch, more or less. We don't have Mario Sports Mix, but so that feels kind of like a missed opportunity. Didn't have a lot of third party stuff, which I'm not too surprised about that, because I think most third parties are focused on the Switch 2. We got some indie games in there. I guess like a new Crypt of the Necro Dancer game, which isn't really anything I'm particularly that interested in. It's got Pepino or whatever his name is from Pizza Tower. I haven't played that game. I probably should at some point. Um, but uh, but yeah, so that was a thing. And some other indie games of kind of a similar caliber. We did get, and this is kind of a big deal. The more I've really like thought on it, we got the announcement of two Sony properties coming to the Switch, which is kind of crazy. We already had that like baseball game. I forget what it's called. Is it like MLB the Show or something? That's like I guess an annual thing that Sony puts out, and I guess there was like a licensing disagreement or something where the I guess MLB was like, well, we feel like we're kind of missing out on potential money revenue by this only being a Switch or only being a PlayStation title, so we're going to look to maybe getting another publisher. That way we can go multi-platform. And Sony, I guess, was like, no, wait, that's a good money opportunity that they'd be missing out on. So they, decided we'll just do kind of like what Microsoft has been doing with their games, and we'll just go multi-platform, and we'll make a Switch version, and we'll make an Xbox version. That way we don't lose out on this deal that we got going on with the MLB. And that made sense, but it seemed like that was really just like a one-time anomaly sort of thing. But here we got two more. We got Patapon, and we got Everybody's Golf. And now, admittedly, Patapon, it's not really a game I'm super enthused about. It's like kind of a rhythm thing. It's got kind of like I think it was was it a PS Vita game or a PSP game? So it's kind of got this kind of minimalistic art style where it's like everything's kind of like a silhouette. It kind of reminds me of that. What was that party game that came out on Wii U? Runbow. That's what it is. Kind of reminded me of that a little bit aesthetically. Or kind of like World of Goo or something, kind of like that WiiWare sort of thing. It's not really my cup of tea. But it is a Sony property, so that's a very big deal. And then also Everybody's Golf, which I believe those games are developed by Camelot, and they of course make the Mario Golf games. But the Everybody's Golf series has always been kind of exclusively to PlayStation. I didn't fully realize that. I didn't realize that PlayStation like owned that franchise. I knew they did Patapon, but but that just opens up so many doors. So I guess this Nintendo Direct was kind of exciting, and that's where I could maybe bump it up to a 7 out of 10 just because of the implications of what this could mean in the future. Could we get like other Sony franchises on the Switch, like the Sly Cooper trilogy on Switch, and then also the fourth game, or like Ape Escape on Switch, Astrobot on Switch? That would be amazing. I could maybe sell my PS5 if that happened, and then just have all of my games on one console. Jak and Daxter, how could I forget to mention that one? That's like my favorite. That's like a childhood favorite of mine. Having that all on the Switch would be a dream. So like if that's what this is pointing toward, then okay, this was a pretty big Direct. I'll concede that. But we don't really know yet. We'll just have to wait and see. But man, the implications of that. Maybe we could even get like a a Sony character in Smash Brothers or something. I've never played God of War, but like if like Kratos got into Smash, that would break the internet. Like holy cow. So yeah, the possibilities of that gets a fella pretty excited. So I'll give the Nintendo Direct points for that. But the games themselves, not like the most mind-blowing of all of Sony's IP they could announce. I am kind of excited for the Everybody's Golf game because the last Mario Golf Super Rush, that game kind of sucked. This game kind of looks, because it's made by the same developers, this one kind of looks like what Mario Golf Super Rush should have been, maybe, with like a much more just traditional gameplay style. Where you got the meter on the bottom, that you fill up, and as opposed to like the weird vertical one they had. If you're not a golf person, you don't know what the crap I'm talking about. So I'll keep my eye on that one. That one's a maybe. But yeah, probably the star of the show, and I've not even really talked about this yet, is Metroid Prime 4. We got our first full gameplay overview. We got probably about like 3 or 4 minutes worth of gameplay, which is kind of what I expected. But my prediction was that was going to be the show ender, and that they were maybe going to announce, Metroid Prime 2 and 3 HD Shadow Drop or whatever. We didn't get that, but I was right that that Metroid Prime 4 would be here. I wasn't of the opinion that they would hold off until the Switch 2 presentation, because we already know that it's coming to Switch 1, and I really just don't know how much sense it makes to have two different SKUs personally. Because it's just like Metroid's never sold super well to begin with, so I feel like if you put out two different SKUs, maybe one of them will do really well. Like maybe the Switch 2 one will, sell a bajillion units or whatever. But I feel like maybe the Switch 1 version would just be kind of like left gathering dust on store shelves or something. So I don't know. I feel like that might not be the best move for Nintendo. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe having it on both platforms is the exact exposure that Metroid needs. But I could also see it kind of blowing up in their face where it's like, okay, well, we sold, this version sold pretty well, but this other one we can't get rid of. So I don't know. Plus, like the Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible anyway, and we won't know, I guess, until April 2nd. But, people are thinking like maybe, with the console having like these AI upscaling features supposedly, that maybe you can just like take your Switch 1 game, like Metroid Prime 4, put it in the Switch 2, and then maybe you'll have to download like a patch or an update or something. But now it's 4K, and now it's got up-res textures, and now, the frame rate's better, and there's no dips. It's a solid 60 frames per second or whatever. But we don't know yet. So if the Switch 2 can do all that stuff, with Switch 1 games, being able to upscale them and make them run better and look better and all that stuff, then I feel like having a Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4 is a little redundant at that point, So I don't know. That's just my my opinion on it. But as far as what we saw of Metroid Prime 4, it looked really good. I gotta say, I was grinning all throughout that presentation. Probably the best looking Switch game to date. I think probably up to this point, it would have been Luigi's Mansion 3. I know a lot of people said that game looks like it could be, looks like it could have been an Xbox One game or a PS4 game, because that game came out before, PS5 and Xbox Series X and all that. But this one I'm also looking at, and it's like, this looks pretty freaking next gen on a Switch. It's very impressive. And I'm sure if you look closely, there's little things here and there. I wasn't super blown away during the last Nintendo Direct. I guess it was last June, which they've had several months to polish the game since then. When it showed, like, it looked really good during the gameplay, but then the trailer ended where it kind of showed that like foresty area with all the foliage and the giant tree and stuff, and the camera pans, and when the camera's kind of like pulled back and like panning overhead, then like there's some stuff that seems kind of like low resolution. If like the textures are kind of lacking, it definitely doesn't look next gen. But in this one, where you're actually just seeing everything from the perspective of Samus and her visor, and you're not like taking the camera up anywhere to get like an aerial shot, it looked really, really good. So yeah, visually I was pretty blown away. I love the shot where you see this big like temple or something in the background. I don't know what it is, and just this very long bridge leading to it. I thought that looked really, really cool. There was a lot of good moments, just as far as like visual flair. The color palette just so vibrant, so beautiful, and gameplay wise, it looks like a Metroid Prime game. So I don't know that this game, unless they're still just like holding on to something, if it's necessarily going to reinvent the wheel for Metroid Prime, which is fine. Personally, I would have liked to have seen something maybe larger scale, kind of Metroid's equivalent of Breath of the Wild in a way. I never finished it, but I really enjoyed, what's the name of that game? Oh God. Shoot, I can't think of it. It was like, something Strange Planet, something like, no, maybe I'm thinking of that Disney movie Strange World. Well, it was something Planet. Oh, that's gonna kill me. But it was like this really quirky game, but it felt very Metroid-esque in nature. But it was also a lot more. It was the Savage Planet. It was something like that. Let me look. It was like Journey to the Savage Planet. Let me look up the full name of this game. Um, Savage Planet. Journey to the Savage Planet. Yeah, that's it. And it wasn't a perfect game. It had some problems. I never actually finished it, but I was pretty invested in it for a good while, and it kind of felt very Metroid Prime esque because it's like your first person. It's a shooter. You're on this alien planet. You're going around. You're blasting aliens and all that stuff. That game's got kind of more of a lighthearted, kind of tongue in cheek sort of a. I don't know. I don't want to say quite Rick and Morty sense of humor, but a little bit more adult oriented humor. It's not as like serious and as Metroid, but yeah. So you're going around, you're doing a lot of Metroid-y things. You're finding stuff in the environment that upgrades your abilities. But it's not really like Metroid where it's like you've got all these different like doors and all these rooms. There are certain areas that it's like, well, you can't access that yet until you get a certain ability, and then you can do a double jump, and now I can reach this ledge I couldn't get to before. So the game does gate you off in that way, but it feels a lot more open world in the sense that like you can more freely explore, and it's not just going from room to room to room. It's much more open ended areas. So I really liked that about the game, and I would have liked to have seen something more like that, but on a larger scale, I think, for Metroid Prime 4. Looks like that's not what we're getting here, although some of the areas seem pretty open. There are still, you're going through doors and stuff, but it might be a somewhat more seamless experience. I don't know. But it still looks really good, though, even if it is just another Metroid Prime game. I don't know if that's necessarily what they need for this game, for this series to become super successful. I think, if they really wanted this to become like, how Zelda went from being, from selling pretty good, decent, to like being just a massive, financial success as it was with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I think they probably maybe should have done something a little bit more ambitious. But it looks really good, though. I'm really looking forward to playing it. And I say that as someone who's really not even like the biggest Metroidvania fan. I played Metroid Prime. I started that game like multiple files back on the Wii U. I downloaded like the Prime trilogy, but I never beat it. I kept getting stuck. I finally did beat it on Switch in the remastered version. But Metroidvanias, I tend to just like get lost, and I'm like wandering around, and I get frustrated, and I don't want to look it up, and just like all this backtracking, and so I usually just never finish them. Like I never finished Hollow Knight, I never finished Super Metroid, but the first Metroidvania game that I ever actually beat was Metroid Dread. I loved Metroid Dread. I absolutely adored that game. I didn't have to use a guide. I ended up 100% completing that game, actually. I enjoyed it so much. Because I don't know, the way it guided you just felt so intuitive. Like it didn't feel like it was holding your hand the way that Metroid Fusion kind of does. But it was just very clever. It's like you do this in the environment, and now you can go this way, but it's like, oh, you can't go back the way you came from because now something happened in the environment, and now this is blocked off. There was like a cave in or something, so now there's a wall here that wasn't before, to where that way the player doesn't waste a bunch of time going back where they came from, checking this path, and then it's like, no, that's a dead end. Where do I go? Where do I go? It really streamlined everything in a way that I really, really enjoyed. So hopefully we'll get more of that here in Prime 4, where there's not a whole lot of confusion, where it's like, where am I supposed to go next? I've been backtracking, past this same room like 30 times. I don't know what I'm missing. But the monsters look really cool. That weird alien thing that they showed that's on all fours, it kind of had like yellow skin, and it almost looked maybe somewhat plant-like it opens up and then just this long tongue shoots out. That looked pretty cool. Samus has some new abilities, and that there kind of are some comparisons with Breath of the Wild you can draw there from her like psychic abilities. So that looks pretty cool. I don't know if I love how instead of like having the green visor, how it's like purple now. I just don't know if I like that as much really. But The abilities themselves, though, it almost kind of reminds me of like Magnesis from Breath of the Wild, or I guess like Ultra Hand from Tears of the Kingdom, where she can just kind of manipulate things. She can like pull stuff to her, like these light balls of energy, and then put it somewhere else and open a door, and then it shows her like moving this turbine that's almost like a metronome sort of thing. I don't fully know what it is, or like a clock, but she's like moving it, and I guess that'll be used for some puzzle, almost like you're trying to crack the code to a safe or something. So the implications for that were very cool. There was one where it's like it kind of freezes time, and she sort of like shoots out like a guided beam that she can kind of make go wherever she wants, left, right, up, down. I wouldn't say that. Excuse me. I wouldn't say that's the most original ability ever, but it is neat to have it in Metroid. I don't think we've ever seen that in a Metroid game, but it kind of makes me think of, you know, it's kind of a weird comparison, but SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom had something similar with like the Bubble Cruiser, where you could like guide it for like 10 seconds. It didn't freeze time, but yeah, so you could like snipe enemies from a long distance by like kind of aiming that wherever you want it to go. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger did something similar. There was like kind of a guided boomerang that you could throw, and then you could kind of guide it wherever you want it to go. There's at least one other example of this that I was thinking of. I want to say it's maybe even a first-party Nintendo game that does something. Oh yeah, Zelda or not Breath of the Wild, but Skyward Sword has like the beetle ability, which those really freeze time, which kind of seems like what's happening here. At the very least, it's being slowed down to a crawl where you can kind of line up and not really worry too much about the enemies being able to attack you while you're doing that. And I'm sure to keep it from being OP, there probably will be some enemies that move at like light speed or something, and so you can't really cheese the battle that way. But yeah, it looks really good. I'm definitely very excited for it. That was probably the highlight of the presentation. I've been asking for a new Rhythm Heaven for a long time, and while I am glad that we're getting one, it is disappointing, that it's not coming out until 2026. But also, I feel like the reveal was kind of anticlimactic. They spent a lot of time just going over the basics of Rhythm Heaven, just kind of showing a very tutorial focused sort of thing of like, press A to jump in time with the beat. And then it's like, oh, it's easier said than done. And then you see him try again and he trips. It's like, let's try adding music. If you get good enough, you can do it with your eyes closed. It was just kind of a boring way, I thought, to reveal that game, where I went from like, Rhythm Heaven, to just, so it's like, hopefully the game will still be great. I was a little bit concerned, and I don't know, because like the two WarioWare games we've gotten on Switch really haven't been that amazing, so I'm a little concerned about the new Rhythm Heaven. I know like they showed like one of the rhythm games, and it's kind of like these birds kind of like flapping their wings. They might have been like seagulls or something, I forget. And I don't know, just the art style of that one looked very kind of generic and uninspired. Like I was looking at like some, Microsoft like clip art or something. But I don't, and I know, every rhythm game tends to have kind of its own aesthetic style, and sometimes they do go for a very minimalistic look. Sometimes that can be kind of the humor of it, like some of the WarioWare mini games might look like they were drawn with a crayon or something. But I don't know, that one just didn't really do it for me. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this game. Hopefully Nintendo doesn't try to sell it for $60, but I wouldn't put it past them to at least sell it at like $50. And then Tomodachi is an interesting one, because a lot of people have been asking for a new Tomodachi Life for years now. And I remember back when I found out about Tomodachi, because like it for a long, like at first it was just a Japanese exclusive game. There was one on the DS, and then there was a sequel on 3DS. I think it was called Tomodachi Collection New Life was the name of the Japanese version of the game. And I remember thinking it looked really cool, and I actually emailed Nintendo. I don't, probably it might not have influenced anything, but I like to think that maybe in some small way I contributed to that game coming over to the West. But I emailed them, expressing my interest as a fan, and hoping they bring that game stateside. That way we can play it. Then the game came out, and I think right before it came out, like a week before, they put out like a demo, like a trial you could play. And I really enjoyed the trial, messing around and like, seeing your Mii's in all these quirky situations. And then the full game came out, and I got the full game, and I was like, man, this really doesn't feel any different from the demo. I feel like the demo already kind of gave me everything, and that the full game's not really adding that much to it. I was kind of underwhelmed by the idea of being this disembodied, sort of omnipotent, godlike figure as the player, where they'll refer to me like, hello, Aaron's look-alike, and like, so I'm not actually really controlling a character in this world. I would much prefer if like I was playing as my Mii character, and I was walking around as my Mii character, and I was working jobs. I was going to, I could be a chef or be a whatever, but you don't really get that sort of control. You're just kind of like watching over your Mii's from a place of curiosity and just kind of witnessing what happens. I feel like it's really hard to even call Tomodachi Life a video game. It's more of a, Nintendo talked about Nintendo Switch 2 being like a, not even really like a video game. It's a game, but there's not much in the way of video. This is more, it's a video, but not much in the way of game. Like you can't really dictate or influence too much the goings on of your Mii characters. So I don't know, but this game, it looks more like a fully like 3D environment where presumably you can move the camera around. So I'm hoping this trailer did give me hope that this Tomodachi Life game will give me more of what I personally am looking for, where I'm running around as my Mii character in the third person or whatever, and interacting with these other Mii's that I put into the world, and I'm like, maybe again I'm working a job and earning money, and then I can go, instead of just like just kind of use the stylus and pat your Mii on the head, and that'll make him happy, and you get happiness points, and then that becomes money, and you can go buy your Mii a sandwich, and then that'll make him happier, and then like I don't really want that. I want to actually be in control. So kind of, I guess, a little bit more like Animal Crossing, but with more freedom than Animal Crossing allows, where it's not just running around talking to villagers, but where I can actually like work odd jobs and like, do all this other stuff. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess I do kind of like how it's not in an apartment building anymore, and how like every character seems like has their own individual house. The island doesn't seem that huge, though. I don't remember how many Mii's you could have in total on the 3DS game. I don't know if it was 50 or maybe it was even up to 100. I don't know, but I feel like it was at least 50. But it doesn't look like there's any way on that island that you could have that many Mii characters with their own house. I guess you could have multiple ones living together. But so I'm wondering if maybe some way you can expand the size of your island and like add new things. But yeah, I would like for it to be a much more customizable experience. And it's like, oh, I can pick, which houses go where, and like, so I don't know. I feel like this game has a lot of potential and can maybe win me back in a way that Tomodachi Life on 3DS never quite hooked me. And kind of when I emailed Nintendo petitioning that they bring the game to the West, kind of what at the time I envisioned the game to be. So I am looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to the Rhythm Heaven, but I am cautiously optimistic about both of those games. Otherwise, there's really not a whole lot in that Direct that particularly interested me. There was a Tamagotchi game, or as they pronounce it in the Direct, Tamagotchi. I've always just said Tamagotchi, which is very close to Tomodachi, and gameplay-wise actually looks very similar. Tamagotchi, of course, being those little things you'd carry around in your pocket back in the day. I used to have one in like maybe 7th grade. And that game actually looks pretty good. I probably won't get it, I don't guess. But I looked at that, I was like, that looks pretty good. It seems like it's also kind of a life sim sort of game. It's very interesting. I don't know how all that works behind the scenes, but I imagine that when Nintendo makes these negotiations and, people reach out and, pay them to, have their game show up in a Nintendo Direct, they probably don't have access to the other games that are going to be announced. So if I were the makers of Tamagotchi, the new game, I'd probably be pretty upset after realizing that Nintendo ended the presentation with Tamagotchi, which is more or less looks like the same thing, but maybe better. We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, I don't know how well that game is going to do. I feel like the announcement of Tamagotchi might kind of cannibalize the sales of this Tamagotchi game. But it's all very confusing. But that was one where I was like, that looks pretty good. Still waiting on the new Fantasy Life. I never played the 3DS one, but I did download it before the eShop shut down, so I intend to someday. I hear it's like one of the best games on the 3DS. Now you've got this sequel coming out. I noticed and I commented during the video, I was like, I hope that was just my stream dipping out. They only showed like a very short, few seconds of footage and kind of a sizzle reel. But the frame rate of that Fantasy Life game looked really choppy. But no, I've watched other people react and they all make that same comment. So I don't know. I'm kind of worried about that game, to be honest. I know there's been some issues with like Level 5. They kind of went defunct for a long time, or at least they weren't porting their games over to America anymore. And then it was like, oh, we're back and better than ever. We got a new Professor Layton coming, and we got a new Yokai Watch, and this and that. And then they got caught using AI, and like Fantasy Life got delayed like multiple times right when it was about to come out. So I don't know what's going on. I really worry for the future of Level 5 and for that Fantasy Life game. So we'll have to see. I don't think it's too much longer before it comes out. Does it come out in April? I really don't know for sure. But yeah, so it was kind of a mixed bag of a direct. I would have liked to have seen more. I think again, just like one port of a Wii U game that people have been asking for a long time, i.e., Wind Waker, would have really set this direct over the edge, and it would have been like, okay, that was solid. But we didn't get that, so oh well. I thought there was a chance we could get Kid Icarus Uprising. Maybe that'll be a Switch 2 game. We'll have to wait and see. Third party wise, I would have loved to have seen Pac-Man World 2 Repack. I've been waiting ages for that to get announced because I love that game. I grew up on it. But that's another one that maybe we'll see that in the Switch 2 presentation. Or maybe not. But I feel like this is Pac-Man's 45th anniversary. Like, come on. They got to have that game to celebrate it. They know how long people have been waiting for it, how much they want it. They got that weird #Consume Darkness game coming out. It's like a Metroidvania where Pac-Man's kind of there, but you're not really fully playing as him, and he's called Puck. That's like this weird, darker thing that was in the direct. It looks kind of cool in some ways. Am I going to pick it up? I don't know. I might, just because I have a bias for Pac-Man. I love that yellow circle so much I would take a bullet for him. But I'm really not dying for that game. So give us like an actual proper like Pac-Man World game. That'd be great. But yeah, there was so much that wasn't here in this Nintendo Direct that I would have expected, that it's really got me like kind of bewildered thinking about what's going to be in the Switch 2 Direct. And that's going to be a separate video from this one. I'm going to upload this one, then I'm going to upload a separate one talking about the Switch 2 Direct that's about to happen, and kind of my predictions, my expectations. But it really threw me for a loop because it's like, we didn't get a Zelda port in this one. No Wind Waker, no Twilight Princess HD. So are we going to get something Zelda here in just a few days for Switch 2? It's like, what could they do? Because like they just had a new 2D Zelda come out last year, Echoes of Wisdom, and the year before that they had Tears of the Kingdom, a full new 3D one. So they're not going to have a brand new ground up Zelda game ready to go, whether it's 2D or 3D. But you would think that they probably would want to have something in the launch year, within that first year launch window for the Switch 2. So now it's got me thinking like, what if we got Twilight Princess ground up remake? And like, the reason we've not got it on Switch 1, the Twilight Princess HD port, is because they're planning something much more ambitious, and they're really going to take advantage of the Switch 2's extra horsepower, and just going to give us a brand new, not a brand new, but just a beautiful remake with like all these, lighting enhancements and ray tracing and all this crap that I barely understand, and to where the game just looks so realistic and crazy on the new hardware. It's just a big graphical showcase. Maybe we're gonna get that in a few days. And then like we didn't get a port of Kirby Planet Robobot, so again, I don't think the Switch 2 is the right venue for that. But maybe they're going to give us a brand new 3D Kirby game instead, and that's why we didn't see Kirby here, because they've got more lofty ambitions. We're going to get the sequel to Kirby and the Forgotten Land here in a few days. I don't know. But it's interesting. It's really thrown a curveball in all my predictions. So I'm going to stop talking about them because again, that's going to be a separate video. But yeah, I think that's pretty much a wrap for my opinions on the. Well, no, it's not actually. I guess we should talk about the app, the Nintendo Today app. And then there was also kind of the digital game sharing things, and both of those felt like that could have been a tweet. I don't know why they had to put that. Again, I feel like this could have been a Nintendo Direct Mini. They could have maybe not had Metroid Prime 4 here. Maybe that be like a separate, like a Twitter drop or something, that overview trailer. But have it as a Direct Mini, announce, a couple of, big deals in, Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life. And then, your indie stuff in there. And then kind of the bombshell announcement of like, hey, Sony's putting more games on Switch. And then, just call it a Direct Mini, and I think it would have been fine. That would have been a solid 8 out of 10, maybe even 9 out of 10 Direct Mini. But I think Nintendo just they set expectations too high by branding it as a full-blown Nintendo Direct. And I feel like they also kind of set expectations too high by, they did tell us Tomodachi was going to be the last game, but then they were like, that was our last game, but we do have one more announcement. Take it away, Mr. Miyamoto. And then you're just like, oh my God. It's like, it's not going to be a game, but it's like, is it going to be, the first trailer for the Mario movie 2? Is it going to be a trailer or a teaser for the Zelda live action movie they're working on? But no, it's just Miyamoto being like, hey, download this new app we got coming out. And, the app might end up being pretty cool. I don't know. They're going to use it to announce, make exclusive announcements and stuff. And we saw the next day they announced the release date for the first Zelda movie. So that's a pretty big deal. So if they keep doing stuff like that, then this app could be pretty cool. But, yeah, it was just weird. Like, you didn't need to bring Miyamoto out for that. When you bring out Miyamoto, everyone's like, oh my God, Miyamoto, what's he going to say? And then it's just something kind of anticlimactic. I kind of feel like this Nintendo Direct went out with a whimper in the same way that like the, was it the E3 2015 Direct that ended with like this whole, we got one more thing. And then it's like, because it was Mario's, I guess, like, 30th anniversary, I think it was, and it was like I looked around because I had a poster of Mario Maker, the Wii U one, that said what anniversary year it was, and it was 30. And so it was like, we're doing this special social media thing where you record a video, hashtag Mario 30 or whatever it was, and it was like, well, that's a stupid way to end the Direct. And then back in 2012, I think it was, where they were, the Wii U was about to come out, and they had that really anticlimactic ending to the Nintendo Land one where it's like, oh, it's a in-game virtual fireworks show. Look at those fireworks. Nintendo hasn't done that in a very long time, but it felt like this was them almost kind of recessing on, because they've gotten so good, like they've gotten it down to a scientific formula of how to make a Nintendo Direct leave an impact, where it's like, we're going to open with something big, and then we're going to have kind of maybe some lows in the middle, but then we're going to reel them back in midway through with something else big, and then, maybe we'll have some little stuff, and then we're going to end it on a big bombshell, whatever. If they were going to put the Nintendo Today app thing in there and have Miyamoto talk about it, again, why did they do that at the very end of the presentation? That's so weird to me. I don't understand that. But, whatever, it is what it is. I guess Nintendo really wanted to announce that and have people download it, ahead of the presentation, the Switch 2 presentation, because they talked like starting April 2nd onward, like every day, I guess there'll be new Nintendo Switch 2 announcements through that app. I don't know what all that's going to entail. I wonder if maybe some way they could use that to streamline like pre-orders and keep like bots and like scalpers from getting it. I don't maybe like they'll share on the app like when it's available at like, Target and Best Buy and, Walmart and wherever, GameStop. I don't know. Probably not, but that would be kind of neat. I feel like they should just consolidate everything into one app, though, because just a couple months ago, they released the Nintendo Music app. They've got the Nintendo Switch Online app, which they kind of haven't added anything substantial to in like probably years at this point. They've got the parental controls app. They've got in Japan they've got a My Nintendo app that logs all your like playtime and stuff. Why not consolidate all that stuff into one singular unifying app instead of just having like 5 or more different like individual like it doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense why you'd have an app for like individual like mobile games like Mario Run and Mario Kart Tour and whatever else, but like why all these individual apps for like Nintendo lifestyle thing like music and for all like just put it all in one app, news and music and all you whatever. But anyway, and then I guess to very briefly talk about the digital game sharing feature that they announced, like the digital game cards or whatever they called it. At first, I was bewildered by it, which when I was reacting to the Nintendo Direct in that video that I since had to take down, I could hardly hear it because again there was a lot of technical issues in that video. So maybe if I could have listened, and actually heard what they were saying, I would have understood it a lot better. But I was very confused at the time. I was like, well, can't we already kind of do that with like, your Nintendo Switch Online account where if you have 2 different systems, you can kind of have your games, you can only play it on one system at a time. But, if you've got a Switch Lite that you play on the go, but then you've also got your Switch OLED that's more for at home, then like, you've got ways that you can play your games across both of those. So I was like, what's the point of this? It seems kind of redundant. Can't we already more or less do this? But I didn't realize at the time, this isn't just like sharing your games with like another Switch console that you own. This is like, no, you're lending it out to a buddy, to a friend. You can do it via local wireless. It looks like there might not be an option for online, which is kind of weird. I don't know if maybe they're going to change that in the future. Maybe they'll update it. But yeah, starting sometime early or sometime in April, they've announced, you'll be able to share your digital games with other people. And I think that's pretty cool. It makes digital games feel a lot more physical in the sense that it's like, well, you have ownership of it. You can, you might not physically be able to eject it from the system. DB Geek, one of my favorite gaming channels, he talked about it. And, how Nintendo, like, they're the only ones doing this, and how it's just very pro-consumer of them, that they are acknowledging that, you bought the game, it's yours, you should be able to do what you want with it, including lending it to people or, whatever. Is this going to maybe someday, open the doors to us being able to sell our games? I don't know. That'd be interesting, though. Could be kind of good for video game preservation if you can sell digital games. Because, like, think about, like, the Wii U and 3DS eShops, the Wii Shop channel, those are all closed down now. So if you didn't get those games, you don't have access to them anymore. What if when those services closed down, if you really wanted it bad enough, you could, like, exchange it with somebody via, internet or, locally, and then just like, you pay it like, hey, for $60, I'll buy that, $30 eShop game off of you that I can't buy anymore. So now it's a rare commodity. And then you can do that and exchange it virtually. And now you've got it on your system. That would be pretty incredible. So, we'll have to see what comes of that. Again, it's one of those things, though. That's pretty neat. Don't know that it needed to be here in the Direct. That could have been a tweet. But, it is what it is. And then I guess one last thing to touch on. They did open the Direct with Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake, or whatever the crap the name of that game is. That is exciting. It's hard for me to get too excited right now because I do really like Dragon Quest. I love Dragon Quest 11. That was the first one I played. I think Square Enix did a really good job with how they marketed that, where like before the game came out, they put out like a 10-hour demo you could play of like the first like 10 hours of the game for free, and I did, and it was really, really good. And I was like, yeah, I'm getting the full version. They also had it in like every Nintendo Direct, so I was already pretty interested. I was like, well, this looks really good. But then they let me play it for free, and I was like, oh yeah, I really want this. So I got the full game. I loved it. Um, and then from there, before the eShop shut down, I downloaded the Dragon Quest games that were, on the 3DS. So I downloaded Dragon Quest 7 and 8. I haven't beat 7, but I beat 8. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Felt kind of more of the same in a lot of ways. Kind of, I guess, like people will say about Pokemon, like how it's not really been innovating or iterating as a series in a lot of meaningful ways. So like I've realized after playing Dragon Quest 11 and then going to the other Dragon Quest games that it's you kind of know what you're getting. It's kind of more of the same, and that's all right, But yeah, I don't think I could binge through all these Dragon Quest games back to back to back. I would get really burnt out because like it's kind of more of the same thing, just kind of with a different story and characters. But same gameplay more or less. Dragon Quest Monsters, the Dark Prince or whatever it was called, I picked that one up and beat it. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. And then I also beat Dragon Quest Treasures, which is kind of like the spin-off of Dragon Quest 11, focusing on Eric and his sister as kids. And that was pretty good. I beat that one too. So yeah, I've beaten 2 Dragon Quest spin-offs and like 2 mainline games, but there's still like, 9 more for me to go. So, hoo boy. But, yeah, so the reason I'm not super, super excited for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 yet is because I never finished the Dragon Quest 3 remake that just came out last year. Because it released right around the same time that Mario and Luigi Brothership came out. And so that game was kind of my first priority. I played through it and beat it. Because it's similar gameplay. They're both turn-based, RPGs. Really didn't end up loving Brothership that much, so I was kind of like, yeah, I really don't think I want to jump straight into another turn-based RPG, especially after this one left somewhat of a bad taste in my mouth. There were things I liked about that game. I'm glad it exists, that we got a new Mario and Luigi game in the year 2024, and that the series isn't dead forever, but it kind of missed the mark in a lot of ways, so that kind of put me off where it's like, yeah, I don't think I really want to play Dragon Quest 3 right now. I played like the first hour of it on the channel. You can check out my early impressions if you want to go watch that video. But I still need to go back and actually, play through that whole game. So as of right now, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 doesn't get me super excited just because I've not finished 3 yet. I probably will pick it up when it comes out though. I'll probably, go ahead and download it or whatever, and that way I'll have it all ready to go for whenever I do get around to it. But that's going to be in the backlog for sure. But that was another one. It was like, okay, that's pretty cool to see there, and that's a pretty big deal, as an opener for Japanese audiences because that series might not be super huge here, but over there, I mean, it's like, I guess probably Pokemon levels of big, or Dragon Ball Z levels of big. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with the Nintendo Direct. Again, apologies if you could hear family members coughing in the other room. Yeah, so, and also sorry again that I had to delete that Nintendo Direct reaction video. Hopefully I'll have all of those troubleshooting issues lined out in time for the big Switch 2 Direct. I'm not super, super disappointed about having to shelve that other one where I ran into all those recording issues, considering that Nintendo Direct didn't really blow me away. But I did still want to get my thoughts out there on it, and I'm going to upload a second video, which I'm going to record like right now, basically, talking about my hopes and expectations and all that fun stuff for the Switch 2 Direct. So stay tuned for that. I love you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And with all that said, bye-bye.